Hey guys, so this is a little bit weird. I usually like being in front of people and being able to be asked questions and stuff like that. It'll have to bear with me now as I do this because it would be the first time that I'm talking to a blank screen in a while. Um, so I got asked by one of your lecturers, Chris, just do a little bit of insight into who I am, what I do, how I do it, and where I came from. And I'm not trying to big myself up here with my picture. My smile doesn't always look that well. It's just the sun was shining, and I got to grow up a couple of men, so it was really nice. So my name is Dean Roche. I'm an ex-student in WIT, which I'll run through now in a couple of minutes. But basically, this is just for me to run through who I am, what I do, and pretty much the everything in between. I'm probably one of those really interesting people in a sense, and that will only be for some, I suppose. Like everything, some people love black holes in physics, and other people love, cleaning shit out of toilets. But we won't talk about that too much. So, as the famous saying goes, if Carlsberg made men, he wouldn't have made me. And that's a true reality. So I have had some mad experiences in this industry, from the good, the bad, and to the downright ugly. And I'm showing a little bit my age there. I might be too old, but I was a really big man on watching old Western movies. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. Where I did my undergrad was actually in WIT. It's since become a sports degree, and I did it when it was a Bachelor of Arts. So I did exercise and health studies. When I was doing the course, I always had a big passion and love for more sports sciencey stuff. So when it came to physiology, it came to sports nutrition, not even general nutrition, sports nutrition, exercise programming, practical classes, all those type of things were the thing that I was just like totally immersed in. And at the end of it, when I came out of it, it was probably the thing where I got the most from, where I got the best results. And you can probably see that from when you look back on my results overall. And it's that interesting thing where you see your passion, you can see your results, or where you put the most time in, you can see the results. So during my time, I built up a really good rapport with some lecturers. I feel if I even contacted them now, they'd hopefully I'd hope they remember who I am, and I'd hope that they'd be thinking of me and knowing what I'm doing at the moment. So if you can do that at this point in time, I would suggest you to do it, because at the end of the day, some of the lecturers that are there at the moment are very heavily involved in teams in the Waterford area, and even sometimes in the Munster, even Ireland area. So the more you can get close to them, the more you'll be on the tip of their tongue when it comes to doing little bits of work here and there, whether it's just a testing session with a team, or whether it is designing a program or helping implement a program, or whatever it ends up being. So definitely build rapport with your lecturers, and at the end of the day, it does help you with your results. The results aren't everything, I can guarantee you that. Searching for a 1-1 and giving up everything else that you're going to do as a practical side of things can be good and beneficial if you're looking for certain postgrads, such as Loughborough. So if you're looking to do masters in Loughborough in physiology, it's one of like the hardest things to get into at the moment. So you need really good references. You really need to really concentrate on what you're writing when you're proposing yourself as candidate for it. And then also you need more than likely a 1-1. There's only one person that I know who hadn't gotten a 1-1 who got in, and they had published a paper as part of their dissertation. And they did a really interesting one. It was based around bloods. So the likelihood of us being able to do that in an undergrad is very unlikely, but there is other opportunities around. So there's many ways or many roads that lead to Rome. In terms of postgraduate, I had done a research master's in Carlow IT. It was based around fatigue monitoring. I found this super interesting. I had an opportunity. Now, I know this sounds a little bit disgusting, but to work with saliva and do some testosterone and cortisol readings through saliva samples. And I did it with intercounty hurlers. So we looked at neuromuscular function or fatigue across 2 competitive seasons, where we used a drop jump and a counter movement jump in order to assess the central or peripheral fatigue, which is basically peripheral fatigue is if I got you to jump up on a bike and I got you to do a 30 seconds wingate and I got you to do a jump afterwards, your score is going to be lower than your pre-score. And that's down to metabolites and things that build up in your system. Central fatigue is more so orientated around the nervous system. So if I got you to deadlift to a max today and max the back squat tomorrow and do your ring gates then on Wednesday, more likely on Friday or Thursday when I retest you, you're going to be down in terms of scores. And that's your body's innervation system or your nervous system itself limiting the amount that you can reduce in terms of force. So we wanted to look at how well they were programmed. So were they being optimized? Were they actually getting enough training? And what ended up happening was there's parts of the season, and this is probably the hardest thing with GA, and it's probably why I would recommend it if you are a county hurler that you limit your exposure to the club scenario. But depending on the club, they're going to want you there for every training session. They're going to want you there for every game. So at that kind of congestion period, some were overtraining, but some were optimized. So we looked at people who were actual playing game time versus the subs. The subs training was optimized because they were getting the same volume as those who were playing the games at that time, but those who played the games at that time ended up playing with their club as well, so they were a little bit overtrained. But it didn't come up with chronic overreaching. It was only an overreaching period, so performance bounced back to normal for relatively fast. If you'd like to know more information about that, you can happily contact me and I'll run you through some of the things that I did, some of the things that I found. But it's not novel enough for me to want to push it too much. I tried writing 2 papers. You have to accept failure in this industry very, very fast. So I ended up getting a lot of no's in a sense. So I applied to a couple of journals and I had retried a couple of times, and I got some blank and harsh no's. Tried to fix what they were saying, but again, it wasn't novel enough in terms of what I found. It had been found in a lot of other studies. Other courses that I have done. So I'm a physical therapist as well. So I did a neuromuscular physical therapy qualification. On top of that, then I have gotten my CSCS. I had been in search of my UKSCA until they changed how they were developing the speed one. It was the last one that I had to do. So I had the Olympic weightlifting. I had done the speed, agility, quickness version that they had, and I had done the programming, and there was one left that I had to do. Programming, speed, Olympic weightlifting, and can't think off the top of my head. But they changed the speed one, so it went completely different, and I ended up having to redo it. I kind of got annoyed, to be honest with you. And then it's just a money thing and a time thing. I will eventually go for it again, but again, this is where it becomes interesting and a nuisance. That even with the CSCS, you have to continuously get CEUs. Now, that's a good thing because it continuously keeps you on your toes and keeps you learning things. But at the same time, Dennis, just feels like a money racket. And if you're not going to go into professional sport or something along those lines, it's not something that you need, because at the end of the day, if you have a degree in your back pocket and you're working with general population, most of the time they don't turn around and it's like, hey, what's your qualifications? If they do, I like that, because you can turn around and say that you have a level 8 or you have some form of extra degrees on top of that or qualification on top of that, and it stands to you in some senses. Working on a gym floor, it doesn't. People don't really care. If you're working for yourself, it does. It gives you more, if you want to call it, variance and variability in your practice itself. But just keep those things in mind. Where I worked, so I had a really interesting experience through my career in the industry so far. I worked in some gyms that you probably know as being the biggest in Waterford at the moment. So I worked in Waterford Warriors. I was there as an intern for 2 years. Yes, I was interning for 2 years. Classification was an important thing at the time, and that's why I ended up leaving. I was looking just for more work, and at the time it just wasn't available. So it was one of those things that we had to just draw the bridge, and it was best for me to leave to follow other suits at the time. I worked on what I would call a global gym or a leisure center. I paid my dues, and I really do feel a lot of people should pay their dues too. Going off and getting a qualification, call yourself an online coach or calling yourself a personal trainer, without actually experiencing working with people, I feel is you're not doing justice to yourself, you're not doing justice to the client. In my experience in Kingfisher, I would have saw probably about 4,000 or 5,000 people across my whole time there. I would have met a lot of people. I would have got a lot of connections, and it would be simple little things. So you end up meeting electricians, carpenters, plumbers, all these type of things that you don't think matter until you end up going out on yourself, and you have someone in that back pocket that you can end up talking to, or you can end up getting to do a little bit of job. Where I'm working now at the moment, after Waterford Warriors, when I left there, I was still in Kingfisher. I ended up working in another gym in Dungarvan called CrossFit Dungarvan. And then I ended up freelancing once I finished in CrossFit Dungarvan. It was kind of getting to the stage that I needed something a little bit more permanent. And in these gyms that do 8 classes a day, so you'll have usually 2 early sessions, you'll have a little break, you'll have 2 mid-morning sessions, and then you'll have 4 evening sessions. That's 8 hours a day. If you have 3 or 4 coaches, unfortunately, you're not going to get full-time hours, and it'll be about pretty much freelancing yourself on top of that, or working part-time job. So when you're looking at it, in reality, if you're going down that route, I would suggest you getting the experience and trying to get something more full-time itself. And back then, online program would have been huge. More so now with the coronavirus and stuff like that, has become more of a bigger thing, and more people are doing it at the moment. Where I'm working now, so the freelance then, in terms, I was working out of 2 places. I was doing my physical therapy in a place called Conor McDonald's, and I was doing then my personal training and my S&C based stuff in CrossFit Waterford. I did, when I was in second year or first year of college, I did a little bit of a stint in CrossFit Waterford, mainly just taking the fundamentals and doing some cleaning to pay for my membership. You'd be amazed at how long 80 quid would go as a student. I know most of you are probably suffering from that at the moment, but 80 quid does go a long way. And if you can find ways and means of giving what you value as your time for income like that, it does go a long way, and it can go into bigger things too. So don't always feel like you have to be paid €50 an hour. You might be well more capable of providing better service than some people are charging more than that. But sometimes, again, you have to pay your dues. Where I'm currently working at the moment is I actually own a strength and conditioning facility here in Waterford. It's called Precision Health and Performance, PHP for short. And we do follow in our classes a philosophy based around kind of CrossFit, but you probably could guess that from the previous gyms that I've worked in. But I have some things that I don't like about CrossFit. Through my physical therapy and some of the other things that I have done, I'm a huge advocate of biomechanics. So some of the things in biomechanics that really interested me, and I'm going to say probably terms that you've never heard of, there's a relative motion and absolute orientation of the pelvis. So the pelvis doesn't just go forward and back, which would be like an anterior and a posterior tilt. It can also go into abduction or external rotation, and then it can go into adduction and internal rotation. And these then affect what the femur can do, or the ability of the femur to be able to do. And there's an ability of the sacrum to go into something called nutation and then counter nutation, which allows us into these positions. There's a really, really interesting thing. It's called the limb arc model that really explains this. And if you watch my page or anything like that, I talk about this in squats. So from like your 0 to 60 degrees of flexion, you're looking at different compressive strategies in comparison to 60 to 180 degrees or 60 to 120 degrees. And from 120 onwards, again, it's completely different. So you start in a position of external rotation, supination of the foot, and then also compression. So it's an inhalation strategy. As you go below 60 degrees, it ends up moving more to internal rotation, an exhalation strategy, and a pronation. So this favors the idea that if you have lack of pronation in your foot, it might be your limiting factor in terms of getting into a bottom squat rather than dorsiflexion. Or if you're only cueing the idea of knees out and supination or that external rotation, it might limit your ability to be able to get down to the bottom. So if you watch powerlifters, it's all wide stance, knees out, get to 90 degrees and come back up. Olympic weightlifters are trying to get the knees forward at a certain point, the knees come back out. And all these different things have really interested me, more so for what I do as a job. So with general population, you get a variance of people who can squat perfect all the way up to people who have never squatted a day in their life, can't touch their knees in a toe touch test. So that's why with CrossFit, I don't like some of the things of putting 75 power snatches into a workout for someone who can't do that. So we vary the workouts depending on the ability, and then we're trying to get people, we basically push coaching more than anything. So we're trying to get people to be able to do a hell of a lot more than what they could before they get in there, and make sure that they stay injury free for a longer period of time. So the AMRAPs are the workouts themselves usually vary somewhere between 5 to like 25 minutes. There's no 45 minutes or 50 or 60-minute workouts in my gym unless you're moving towards an elite level standard, which would be competitive. So on top of that then as well, we have myself and another physical therapist that are working out the unit. So there's if you want to call it physio, but I can't technically call myself that because I'm not chartered. So physical therapy rehabilitation section of the gym as well, which we put a huge push on with all the clients as well, even in the classes. So our warm-up structure will be based around some of the things that we would implement in a rehab scenario itself, getting to move better, getting more co-contraction stuff, increasing muscle slack and stuff like that, so that you have more leverage to create more power. All these like really fancy things that people are doing at the moment. But if you're watching Instagram and you see these people doing all this prep work, I'll try and leave that out because it's very hard to get buy-in for that unless people are really, really sore and really in a bad position. In terms of what I want and how I'm planning on getting there, there's a lot of things that I want to add to the gym. I envisage that we have probably double the size that we currently do, that I have 4 physio rooms. I invested in a portable VO2 max testing kit for reasons I'm not going to explain just yet. If you follow our feed on Instagram, you'll get more information. And I'm not trying to get likes, I swear. So with this VO2 max testing kit anyway, I really want to push some more of that elite level testing along with some of the general population stuff. So you might think VO2 max, only people who are elite need to know that. In reality, if you're a person who just comes in and exercises, it's a nice thing to know because you know where you fall in terms of a norm. If you're average or above, you know you're pretty healthy. If you're average or below, you're probably unhealthy. Now, I know I said average twice, but we're looking at the overall average of all these populations that are coming in. If you're elite, that's perfectly fine. If you're in that higher standards, and you can go off the ACSM guidelines to be able to find this out. I would also like to invest in some things like a K-Box, Lactate Pros and stuff like this. More so, I'll probably get the Lactate Pro quicker because it's more feasible. And I'll also look at something called a Moxie monitor. So at the moment, there's a real big interest in my mind of what actually happens in the muscle or what's happening to the person during exercise. So if you look at a K-Box, there's an eccentric and a concentric component of every movement that we do. The eccentric is the loading phase, and we should have this stretch starting cycle where we get from the bottom to the top position on a squat. So when we use a Moxie monitor, we can figure out that when the person goes down into the bottom position, are they using too much tension? And the analogy I'll give you is if you have the heart that's in a constant contraction, it doesn't allow blood flow to come back into the heart. So it limits the amount of oxygenated blood to get back into the muscle and out of the muscle. So if I'm looking at a performance aspect of training or anything like that, can I get the person to be able to contract and relax at a super quick rate? So if I can get them really good on something like a K-Box in terms of that, being able to time that spring from the bottom position back to the standing position, are they able to get the best from their performance when they're in a workout? So they're able to go for a longer period of time with less energy and at a faster rate. And I know that sounds, well, it doesn't sound simple, but it should be a goal for everybody. And this is where it comes into mobility issues. Are you fighting against tension? Are you moving to the best capacity possible? So that's where I envision myself going. It's probably coming and taking a step back from the coaching hours that I'm doing at the moment and kind of going towards that more testing orientation, trying to really push the rehab element and trying to really push performance elements on certain populations, more so CrossFit because I have such an interest in it. I really think that science should be put at the forefront for it, which it currently isn't at the moment. And I think there's a hell of a lot more we can get from it. What I would recommend for all of you would be, like, it's very hard to figure out what to do, where to do it, how to do it. If you've envisaged yourself being an S&C coach with a team, now this is super important, okay? You're going to have certain requirements. You're going to have a first aid. So you do that in college, keep that up to date. Literally every 2 years, do it. Even if you don't have the money, find it somewhere, get a loan, do it. You're going to have to get some sort of accreditation. It's either going to be a basis of UKCA, CSCS isn't really renowned as much as it was anymore because the exam is multiple choice. But that doesn't mean that's not a hard exam. If you read the book, you will pass the exam. And I would wholeheartedly say that, like, it's not really a hard exam. But I can't say that out too loud. So you'll need a UKSCA or a basis, or you will need some form of accreditation for a job. Usually people look for the UKSCA. More than likely, you might need something like the ISAC as well, which is the instrument calipers for taking body fats, because most teams are doing that at the moment. But the biggest thing is going to be experience. So you're all in college at the moment. You have a lot of free time, whether you think it or not. Like in reality, you have 20 hours of lecturing per week. You have plenty of time to train, you have plenty of time to be shadowing somebody somewhere 2 or 3 times a week. If you can get away to a bigger team and you can get your foot in the door, I would highly recommend it. And this could be something so simple as shadowing the academy coach in Munster, or shadowing the academy coach in the Waterford soccer team, or anything like that. Or if you feel like you want to go down the CrossFit route, find a good CrossFit coach. Now, I'm not going to put myself in that category. Again, we'll go back to our Carlsberg analogy. So look at what kind of coaching you like to do, how the people that you're following do it. And if that resonates with you, then you go and you shadow those, learn as much as you can, and then try and ease yourself into that industry. It's amazing what you can do when you put your mind to it, but you're not going to be able to leave an undergrad and get a job like that. More than likely, you'll have to get in masters before you get your foot in the door, unless you have an internship. If you have a good internship, good experience, you probably get your foot in the door, and they'll probably pay for your masters because they're interested in studying a certain element. So Leinster Rugby used to do this a hell of a lot. So they take on undergraduates and they'd use them as interns, and then they would get them to do a research masters based on a particular thing. They were one of the first people to introduce RSIs, and then they were doing all these performance tests and stuff like that, and publishing plenty of papers along the time. So that's an insight into my background. It would be what I would recommend to anyone who's currently in college. If you have an interest in a certain field as well, try and swing your dissertation a small bit towards that too, whether if it's a certain type of physiology based thing, or whether it's a certain type of programming thing, whether it's cluster sets for strength versus band assisted, or accumulated resistance, or accommodated resistance, whatever the fancy term you want to call it, it all means the same thing. That you go off and you do that, and then it will hold towards a particular job that you want to go and do. So if you really enjoy Louis Simmons and you see yourself working on Westside, try and do something strength oriented in your dissertation that might look cool to him, and he might want to know your insights on it. How I ended up where I am, I kind of explained that. It is a really funny story. I through my time in the industry itself, when I was working in different places, I don't know if it's my attitude. I have a really growth mindset, as I would like to believe. I end up doing a lot of things for free because I feel like the stuff that I know you can read in a book. And if you can read it in a book, people can go and learn it themselves. So I have to get better at putting value on the knowledge that I have. But when I was working in these gyms prior, I used to only want to help people. It was like, I'm going to give you 24/7 support. And in reality, I'm not waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to text someone back if they message me about their nutrition plan or they message me about the program. So it's not really 24-hour support. It's more like 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. These are your slots. If you don't want it, that's fine. But funny story. So in normal gym industries and stuff like that, owners can be very hot-headed, and they can be very, it's not ego, ego is probably the wrong word to put around it, but they can get intimidated by someone that works for them getting more attention than them, if that makes sense. So if members start going to an employee more than the owner, it can be very intimidating that they're going to lose out on membership if this person leaves. When in reality, if the guy who invented Pixar, so all the Toy Story movies and everything like that, wrote this in his autobiography, hire people who are smarter and better than you, because they'll do a better job than you ever could. You do a really good job, then you're going to get really good results. In terms of that, just make sure that still go in and do your best. Don't just try and do what the boss wants you to do. Try and excel in what you're doing in terms of the position. But in all three of the gyms that I either freelanced and I worked in as an intern or as a full-time coach, I felt like I was pushed out the door for those things. And it's interesting now that I end up where I am. We are currently probably, doesn't really make sense, but we were currently the fastest growing gym in Waterford, even during COVID, which is really awesome. But I have put a lot of years. I'm into my 10th year in the industry. So I'm 9 years at the moment in terms of coaching in the industry this way. So, there's a lot of years behind me, even though I am young. Currently, during COVID, your day looks completely different than what it does on a normal day, but I try and keep my routine as best I can. I usually wake up And this is a true coach's experience. 6 a.m. I have a coffee. Get used to drinking lots of coffee. I take the Zoom class at 6:30 in the morning. I either drop my son to creche after that, or I have some time to myself where I will do some coursework on certain courses that I'm doing at the moment. Heavily, as I said, on biomechanics at the moment, trying to get some CEUs for the NSCA for CSCS and trying to make it as interesting as possible. And then just finishing off some other things that I want to tidy up in terms of those papers and getting published. From there, then I will go off. I have like a non-negotiable time for training. It's the same time every single day. For me, that's my downtime. That's my religious. I'm just going to stay fit, stay healthy, and look the part in the industry. And then after that, then it's collect my son from creche, get home, obviously eat during those times as well. Get him all fed and watered and ready for bed. If I don't fall asleep on the couch, I'll do some more coursework, or I will prepare the programming or something like that for the gym. I work with online clients at the moment. I've been full, which is crazy to say, probably the last 8 months. I really value my time in terms of what I do with clients. In terms of individuals that I work with, as in individual based, I have about 30 at the moment. That would be programming only. In terms of nutrition, I would have about 20, and then between a combination of both, 10. So it's about 60 clients in total, outside of what we have in the gym. And again, like, that's not bigging myself up. It's just those type of times. And when starting a business, if you ever do, you'll understand that as much income as you can get to start, as much as you can invest into the business, the better. Okay. So you have to remember that if you keep your members happy, your gym will be happy. If you cannot, or make them see that you're willing to invest into the business, sometimes it can become stagnant very, very fast, that people just feel that you're trying to take their money and invest it into other things. So be conscious about those things and not take it too much to heart if people do leave, which I kind of do. In terms of me being full, I have a waiting list. So when one goes out, one comes in. Sometimes I take downtime. I have been as low as about 35 clients. And that was just when I started to get really stressed. But as I said, the waiting list got me back up to that fairly fast. And it's only more now in COVID times that I have the time and the opportunity to do it. And we have put out that we're hiring a coach in the gym, which I ended up getting a lot more CVs than I expected. Which brings me on to another topic. If you are planning on going for a job, now, coming from a person who has read some of the worst CVs ever, like, send me a cover letter and a CV and I get just a CV. That is annoying. When you're sending the email or you're sending it through to the person, make sure it's a PDF for one, that it's not a Word document. That is super important. That means that you took the time to download it, attach it, and send it. That's one thing. If they want a cover letter, make sure that the cover letter itself is based around the position. Okay. It's not for you to glorify yourself or your experience. In reality, if you're applying for a part-time coaching job in a facility like mine, you have very little experience. And I don't want to talk people down, but in terms of working with clients and done personal training, everything like that, you've probably worked with less than 100 people. We would work with 100 people a day. So in reality, you have very little experience in that sense. I've been working in the capacity of a class in an environment in a gym that's really, really busy, and we're trying to get a certain outcome from that. So you have to remember that you have to, from your experience, look at what the gym does, look at what we're looking for. So if I use the term coach, see how we coach, try and find a flaw or a fault in how we coach, and then explain how your experience can fit in with our philosophy and make the gym better. That would be really important. So if you're applying for a sports scientist job anywhere, try and look up the person who's currently doing the sports science job at the moment. So the head of sports science in the academy. If they're a huge blood flow restriction guy and they absolutely love occlusion for training, read some papers based around blood occlusion, look at the pros and cons of it, and suggest that your experience was based around dynamic resistance. And it was about the contract release stuff that I was talking about earlier. And you can turn around and say, I feel from my experience with this, we might be able to implement or design a program based with the blood flow. And you could be talking about your arse, blood flow restriction that might get more from the, or give them more value for their training or bigger bang for their buck. When I'm reading that, I'm just like, okay, he has researched me, he has looked at the job or the role, and he also feels like he can add value to what we're doing. You may not, but it's already after getting your foot in the door. When you're designing your CV as well, try and add color. Try not to do the Times Roman, size 12, 1.5 spacing, black on white. Add a little bit of color, add a little bit of flaunt and texture and stuff like that. That is really, really impressive when you take time to do that. In your email, have it as an introduction into your cover letter. Express your interest in the position, say your name, all those type of things. So make sure that you get that. And that would be my 2 cents on giving a CV or a cover letter on top of what I would suggest if you're trying to go down a certain avenue or a route in terms of a job. Pros and cons with what I currently do at the moment. So the pros are I get to help a lot of people in a short period of time. So in 8 hours in the day in terms of coaching, or 7 hours currently we're at in the classes, we go back from COVID, that I get to help the bones of 100 people every single day, which is awesome, on top of the people that I'm working with individually. The cons are you're run ragged. So I have 2 other coaches, but it's one of those things, you end up going in there and you still want to stay there even when they're coaching. I'm not judging them. I'm not worried about the job that they're doing, but it's just like I feel like I want to be there all the time. It's a huge con in terms of what I'm currently doing. So if you can get a coaching job where you can pop in, pop out and switch off, that would be awesome, and let the head person do it. But my goal would be to try and get a coaching staff and team that is big enough and good enough that I can take a back seat on the gym run itself. So I can go down my endeavors in terms of the physiology route with the VO2 max testing, lactates, and all those type of things. Other pros are I love what I do. I absolutely love it. I love getting up early, as hard as that sounds. I hate it at the moment because I have nothing to look forward to other than sitting behind a laptop and doing a Zoom. But I love getting up early in the morning. I love going in. I love talking to people. I have this little thing. Try and learn as much as you can about your clients. So family, their occupation, their current relationships, and things that they want to achieve. So if they're a pharmacist, what's their end goal? You know, who's their husband? Who's their wife? Who's their family? Do they have brothers? Do they have sisters? Most of the people who come into the gym, I can rattle off 1 or 2 things about it, and it stands a hell of a lot. There is an acronym for it. I call it FORT. I heard it on an interesting podcast. So family, occupation, relationships, and I can never remember the T. Ford. I'm sitting here now and I'm trying to figure it out. You could ask me questions at this point, but unfortunately you can't. If I had you as a live Zoom, we might be get some chat box going, but unfortunately we can't either. But think about that acronym and try and learn about your client as well. What I advise you to do really depends. Experience is the big one. Pay your dues. I've had interesting conversations with people I program for, members of my gym, and are trying to get into this industry. The word coach for me is really, really interesting. I'm only a coach to the people I coach, but I'm a student to the people that I refer to learn. So at the end of the day, are you ever truly a coach unless you're a master? And that's something that you have to take into account. Now, I'm being a little bit of, I wish I could say knob, but I am just a small bit. But in terms of saying that you're a coach, what does that entail? What classifies you as a coach, and what deems someone else as not being a coach? Are super things to take into account for. Are you just a sports scientist? Are you just a facilitator in that hour? Are you just bringing someone in, exercising, and sending them out? You know, take on the role and take the reins of the role, and that's super important. So it depends. What do I advise you to do? It depends. Where do you want to go? That is an important thing. Backtrack or find someone who's gotten there. Kerwin Flatt, he has the strength network. What does he call it? The SCN, the Strength Coaches Network, or something like that. Look him up, Rugby Strength Coach on Instagram, and he talks about networking as being be all and end all. And some of his interns have not even had a degree in sports science or kinesiology or anything like that over in America. They've had like bachelors of business, and they've had like philosophy degrees and stuff like that, and some of the best interns he's ever had. So it depends. This is a huge decision, where you want to go, how you want to get there, and everything like that, and putting time into it. Sometimes we end up going wrong. I've been wrong more times than I've been right. I wanted to be a nutritionist at one stage, and I ended up finding that my true passion is physiology. I absolutely love it. I love it more than anything. And my thoughts on it is physiologists can program exercise and strength, but an exercise or strength and conditioning coach can't program physiology as well as a physiologist. We also know most of the stuff, most is probably the wrong word, but we know a lot about nutrition as well if you go down the physiology route. So you understand cellular mechanics and stuff like that and how things react. And that really interests me. Sky filament theory, wow, like that's just that for me. I'm just like sitting here, I'm like watering at the lips, wanting to go off and read about it again. Internships, courses, meet the requirements and make sure you stand out. So these are definitely things that I would recommend you to try and go and do, and make sure that you can get as many of those things behind you. So as I said, the ISAC, the UKSCA, some other like random course that you don't even think would stand to you, could end up standing to you. So it could be just a simple blood flow restriction course that like you found interesting and you went off and did it. I wanted to be a physio at one point as well, but more so now I'm looking at, as I said, the physiology route and trying to use my understanding of biomechanics of how I can make someone be more efficient at the movements they do by getting them into a better position and losing or wasting less energy. And that's how it's all amalgamating itself into one. And that's how I would stand out if I was trying to apply for a job, which I eventually will, because I'm not going to be able to stand on a gym floor for the rest of my life. We'll probably go down the PhD route eventually. When I did my research masters, I was kind of thrown into the deep end, and you don't realize it. Taught masters is completely different, but you end up being told you have to go and do all this work, nowhere to start, no work count. They're like, yeah, you have to go and conduct this. And I was like, a month into my master's, like, yeah, you're going to be out. I had to touch base with the coach of the team that I ended up working with. Yeah, you're going to be out now on Thursday. It's like, okay, I have nothing ready. I have nothing prepared. I don't know how to take a saliva sample. I don't know how to do this. And you end up just going out and like totally winging it. And as they said, the best people in the world believe their own shit. So believe your own shit as best you can. Fake it till you make it, as some of my lecturers had said to me years ago. So definitely do those things, get experience. And if you are going to go down certain routes, I would suggest you to go maybe a research master's before PhD, because can be flipped anyway, but it's always nice to have a taught master's behind you. And then maybe if you get in the right job, you'll be able to get a funded PhD. I hate PowerPoints. I absolutely do. The reason being is I'm not very tech savvy. I'm not very creative with my slides. I much prefer to talk, as you probably noticed over the last couple of minutes. I do like questions. Questions create conversation. Conversation creates interest. Interest is awesome. Rather than me sitting here pretending I know what I'm going to talk about, which is another thing I tried to do for the last, I don't know, about 20 minutes. But as I said, guys, if you want to check me out and you want to contact me on anything that I discussed today, want more information on certain things, hit me up on my Instagram, which is at Precision Health Performance, and it's underscores in between, and hit me up then with email at precisionhealthperformance@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Hopefully you get on really well with our science hack friend, Chris. And if you have, as I said, any questions, please hit me up and contact me. Enjoy the rest of your semester, guys. Enjoy whatever you end up getting into or what you end up doing. There is a path for everybody, and please don't be like some of the people that I studied with that end up working in a shop with a sports science degree, because it's not that it's a waste of time. If you do go off and work as an operator in some big pharmaceutical companies that start off at 19 euro an hour, which sounds awesome, but again, do you love your job or do you hate it? I'd rather work for 10 euro an hour, which I don't, but I'd rather work for 10 euro an hour on something that I love rather than going in and hating my job for 40 hours a week. So again, guys, I'll talk to you soon. If you need anything else, just shout.